Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we are doing a podcast and a workout called Repetitive Motion Colonial Williamsburg style. As great as exercise is for your body, lots of sedentary adults end up injured, in pain, as they try to transform their lives through healthy habits. Repetitive motion movements like walking, jogging, biking, and even swimming can wear down tired and tight and unnourished body parts. So these moves, it's going to be about 20 minutes of moving, will help you prepare your body for those activities. I'm also going to tell you another story from my book, Darwin on the Treadmill, a book not yet published, but a book I finished in first draft this spring, and I'm very excited for it. We're talking today about the clay pits and brick making in Colonial Williamsburg. But let's get started now first with a postural systems check. And we're going to get started with getting your heart rate up a little bit on your feet, and then we're going to go down to the floor for a lot of movements that will stimulate and exercise, strengthen the movements to the side of the body, the lateral parts of the body, and the inner thighs and your core. So your postural systems check is where you simply stand up really tall and make sure that your posture is adjusting for its perfection, as neutral posture as you possibly can get yourself. Your head should obviously sit on top of your neck, on top of your shoulders, but make sure that it's aligned properly. So your spine goes straight up through the back of your neck and into your head. Obviously, you want to make sure as you're standing up that your ears and your shoulders are lined up vertically. A lot of modern adults have a forward head position that's become natural because of our lifestyles, because we're always looking at a screen, because we're, driving a car, whatever. So you want to make sure you get that head back, your ears and your shoulders line up. And by also making sure that your shoulders are lined up, that forces you to push your shoulders back a little bit, which opens up your chest. And that sort of prevents the tightness of the upper part of your back. It also prevents the collapsing of your pectoral, your chest muscles, and the inefficiencies or the decreased efficiency of your respiration. It helps open up your chest so that you can respirate fully. Your lung capacity can increase. So now you're thinking about your tummy muscles. Zip up those tummy muscles a little bit. Pull in your belly button toward your spine. The elevator sort of use of that thinking is how you pull in and up, and then you tuck in your tailbone or scoop your butt a little bit in order to make sure your pelvis isn't tilted. And then, of course, your legs. Think about your right leg versus your left leg. A lot of the repetitive motion stuff we deal with, we're going to talk about this later, is the difference between the strength of your right leg versus the strength of your left leg, and something we call at In Shape pivoting, which is the transfer of your motion from one leg to the other with any motion that you're involved in, any repetitive motion you're involved in. So now you've taken a couple of deep breaths as well. Take a couple more, deeply inhaling through your nose. Smell the air around you. Hopefully it smells nice and fresh. And even if it isn't, take all that air in through your nose and then bellow your carbon dioxide, those waste gases that are trapped inside your body. They want to get out, so you push it out through your mouth and use the strength of your diaphragm to do so. So take one more big deep breath, inhaling through your nose, smelling the air around you, and then bellow the carbon dioxide out of your body through your mouth. Now let's do some standard squats. We're going to start with a standard squat, then we're going to incorporate some forward kicking in and some reverse lunges in and some side kicks as well, so that we get your heart rate up and we activate a lot of the muscles in your legs and in your butt and your hips, and then we're going to go down to the floor. So standard squats. You're going to stand with your feet shoulder width apart. You sit down and back into an imaginary chair in order to make that squatted motion work. And you can actually sit in a regular chair if you don't want to do the imaginary one, but either way, sit down and back. You want your knees to stay back away from your toes, the tips of your toes. If your knees go too far forward, you run the risk of pulling on those joints, the joints in your legs, the knees, and you don't want to do that. So be careful. Also, inhale down, exhale up. You're going to go for about 30 more seconds. We're not timing or counting rather the repetitions, but rather timing you. So you're inhaling on your way down, pause for a fraction of a second. That apex where you switch directions is really important, because if you're not careful, momentum will help you bounce back up, and then gravity pulls you down, momentum helps you back up, and all of a sudden you're not actually doing as much work as you think you are. I see this all the time. InShape Fitness has been in business since 1997. So more than 20 years we have been working with clients. I have been watching people do basic moves like this, and it's really easy to do them wrong. So take the time to learn how to do it. You're not going to do it perfectly if you're just getting started, and that's okay. Now we're going to add a forward kick in. So what you want to do, your hands can either be on your hips, or you can bring them out front, sort of like a kickboxer might defend him or herself. And then you lift up one knee really high, and then kick out the lower leg with a flexed foot in order to get that kinetic power generated out of your center and through your heel, which is where you would strike if you were actually kicking something. So same leg, let's just do 20 seconds more on this side, then we'll do 30 seconds on the other leg. Breathe deeply in through your nose and out through your mouth. Now, this inhaling through the nose business is really important in terms of the way that your brain reacts to a higher output through your heart rate, through your heart, right? As you are exercising and your heart rate elevates, your executive brain, the parasympathetic nervous system. I always get those words mixed up. The sympathetic nervous system is the primitive part, and the parasympathetic is the more executive, the modern part of the brain. Now switch legs for me and do a forward kick for 30 seconds on the other side. And what happens is if your executive brain is regulating your heart rate, you are able to control things like stress hormones and elevation of your heart rate for whatever reason. If you have to start jumping, or if I throw a burpee into this mix, which I may very well do, right? So you've got 5 more seconds on the second side, and then we're going to combine the squat with the forward kick. All right, so for now, 30 seconds, what I want you to do, you're going to alternate the kicks. You're going to squat down, and as you come up, you kick 1 foot forward and keep going. Excellent. Keep the back straight. Exhale through your mouth. Remember to smell the air around you, which is inhaling through the nose. And again, this is a real anatomical issue that people have with exercise. It's the air passing through the nasal cavity that actually combines, it attaches to sensors inside of your nose and that activate that part of your brain. So there is a physiological thing that is happening that is not to be ignored if you want to exercise really efficiently. Okay, now let's add another move. I said we're going to add some lunges in here. Let's do a little bit of a reverse lunge. A little bit of lunging into a reverse lunge. I like reverse lunges, stepping backwards and then lowering the body by bending both knees. And you don't have to go all the way down. Lunges are very tricky, so be careful if you have orthopedic concerns about your knees, the integrity of your knees. Just make it a small one. It's sort of like a little kickstand, almost just like a squat, in fact. So when we add the kick in, it's going to seem like you're doing basically that same combination, only it's going to be with one leg forward, one leg back. So your reverse lunge, if you isolated one leg and just been reverse lunging with one leg, go ahead and switch to the other side. Otherwise, keep alternating. And if you want to go ahead and add in that kick, that would be great at this point. So you lunge to the reverse, and then you kick to the forward. Lunge back, and then bring that knee up high and kick out your foot with the flexed foot in order to, again, make that kinetic energy move through your body properly, where it is derived in the center of your body and then travels down your leg and out your heel. A couple more seconds, and then we're going to do some side kicks, and then we're going to go down to the floor. All right. I also want to get us going with this fun story. I am a history buff. A lot of the reasons why I wrote Darwin on the Treadmill have to do with the fact that I think all of the lessons that we need to understand, to apply to modern life as far as wellness goes, we can use modern technology and our modern scientific knowledge about lots of our biological processes and medicines, etc. But there is something to be said for understanding how people did everything they needed to do with their bodies before gyms were invented. Gyms and gym equipment have really only been around for about a century, and that's it. Maybe a little bit more if you go back to like the circus times in the early 20th century, where there were the strong men lifting really, really, really heavy weights and such. But we have what we need to stay fit. And in Colonial Williamsburg, they were doing something really interesting where they were making bricks. So now these side kicks are where I want you to stabilize on your strong leg. So if you're right-handed, stabilize on the right leg. Now hold on to something if you need to. What you want to do now is lift the left knee up the lower leg, up to the side. And then it's that lower leg kick motion with a flexed foot as you then bend the knee and put the foot back down on the floor. So let's do 30 seconds on each side where you lift up the knee, kick out the foot, and then put the foot back down. Now, if that's too easy for you, and I accept that, you might be joining us for this podcast workout and you want something a little bit harder, you can add a jumping jack in between each of your kicks. You can add a forward lunge in between each of your kicks, or a reverse lunge into each of your kicks, in between each of the kicks. But the functional component that makes me want you to do this move in relation to repetitive motion has to do with the activation of the side of the body. Switch legs now. And again, jumping jacks are great. It is an exercise that you may think of as sort of silly because, there are so many more sophisticated things that you can do. But the fact is, when you jump and jump out and up with the jumping jack motion, you are activating the side of the body. You are providing an elevated extension of your shoulders and arms, which also elongates your spine. You are using the balls of your feet to land lightly, which activates neurotransmitters that reside in your feet, which is plyometric based, which is really helpful for the activation of tissues, the smaller ancillary muscles in your legs and in your hips and butt. And of course, your heart rate is elevated. Now let's drop down to the floor. I want you to sit in child's pose and take roughly 6 or 7 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. We're going to do fire hydrants here. We're going to get into some side planks and do a bunch of other exercises that really work the butt and your hips. So, early repetitive motion is something that we defined. I defined it in the description today. It's motions like walking, hiking, sort of, yes, also, but jogging, or sprinting, running, biking is one. In a gym facility, an elliptical machine or a stationary bike would be a repetitive motion. Even swimming. And early Americans did not use the term repetitive motion. In fact, people who belonged in the upper classes in Colonial Williamsburg, they would have walked leisurely and ridden horses for hunting and sport, but they did not have a reason to exercise, with air quotes, on a machine or even to walk such that they elevated the heart rate and in conjunction with that move them from one place to another. So that's how kind of we define repetitive motion now. Okay, so now you've done your child's pose, you've taken your deep breaths. What I want you to do is get into quadruped position. So we're talking about repetitive motion on 2 feet and the way that humans are uniquely designed to move on 2 feet. But I want you on 4 limbs, hands and knees, and your knees should line up with your hips, and your hands should line up with your shoulders. And you want a flat back. And then the fire hydrant move, which we're going to do 1 minute. I'm going to tell you when to switch. All the fire hydrant move is a lift of the leg out to the side as though you're lifting your leg. It's called the fire hydrant for a reason. Like a dog peeing on a fire hydrant, you lift up your leg to the side. So your leg remains at a right angle the whole time at the knee joint and your hip joint as well. And you just lift up and then you pause at the top. Again, apex, closing the leg back down or squeezing the leg back down is something you want to control. So you want to control both directions. And then in 30 seconds, I'll tell you to switch sides. Now be very careful that you don't lift your leg so high that the corresponding hip also lifts. You want to keep your hips parallel to the floor. Okay, so back to Colonial Williamsburg. There was a lot of labor, obviously not the upper classes, but lots and lots of people did lots and lots of manual labor, which would have, of course, elevated the heart rate if you were chopping wood or, sweeping a floor or, in lots of different ways, harvesting garden victuals, procurements of food and various other things, carpentry, all made up the sort of working class. Lower body repetitive motion. Go ahead and switch sides, by the way. Is something that would be classified in this brick making activity that I discovered when my daughter and I visited Colonial Williamsburg, and they have all these really interesting activities for families to engage in that will help sort of bring you back into that time. If you have not visited the sort of historical triangle area of the southern part of Virginia, you really should give it a week at some point soon and check it out, because Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown all have these really amazing family-oriented activities where you learn and sort of immerse yourself in the lives of people that were living here the United States a couple of hundred years ago. Okay, now drop into a plank. Let's get you into a plank. And so I want you to go down to your elbows. You walk your feet out for 45 seconds. You just hold the position. And if you can't hold the position on your feet, you drop to your knees. That's perfectly fine. Just don't let your butt lift up too high, and breathe. So making bricks was something that obviously they were starting to do a lot of in Colonial Williamsburg. They didn't transport bricks. They didn't have trucks to move bricks around from place to place. So they made the bricks where they needed them. So they created a workspace. A hut was constructed and out of timber and then shaded, because of course this all was done in the summertime when they could be barefoot. They needed to have a source of water because they have to keep this clay really moist. And then the molding process was such that they used these planks of wood to create the rectangular bricks. I'm going to tell you about the repetitive motion part in a second. And then they laid them out in the sun to dry them. And then later on, when it got cooler, they would fire them all. And then the following year they would be used. Okay, now you're out of the plank. Go to downward facing dog. Take a few seconds to stretch out the back, stretch out your hamstrings, and breathe. If you can. Now this is going to be very difficult for some people, so don't do it unless you know you can. Transport yourself from upward face or downward facing dog to upward facing dog. I call it dynamic dog. And it's actually an exercise that I do every single morning. It is part of my daily routine, 21 times. Dynamic dog is what we call it. Upward dog, downward dog, upward dog, downward dog. And it's a really amazing exercise that keeps those hips nice and spry and keeps your back supple and mobile. All those soft tissues inside of your body that you really want to be healthy through your decades as you get older and things begin to seem more difficult. There are reasons to exercise every single day, not to, kill yourself in the gym, those hardcore military style boot camp type workouts. Totally not for someone who's probably working with me or one of my staff persons here at In Shape Fitness. We can do the hardcore stuff, but it's the everyday stuff that really makes a difference. Okay, Now, what I want you to do is turn to your side and let's hold a side plank on each of our sides for 20 seconds each. Now, on your side, you're still on your elbow, and your elbow still lines up with your shoulder. Your legs are stacked, your hips are stacked, and your 20 seconds starts now. If I go back to Colonial Williamsburg, I'm going to miss that 20 seconds. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and get you swapped over to the other side in 3 seconds. 2, 1. Now go ahead and switch. Excellent. So of course you'll notice probably that one side is harder than the other. If you're right-handed, it's probably that the left side is harder than the right, and that's normal. Not good, but it is normal. And one of the things that's interesting is that if you do have some ambition, if you've got a bucket list that has like a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon or a full marathon or an Ironman or a swim event, something on your bucket list that involves physical activity and repetitive motion, you want to pay attention to the difference between the strength of the two sides of your body. It will come into play later on. Okay, now what I want you to do is go back to quadruped position. We're going to do another kind of fire hydrant, but it's more like a fire hydrant arabesque. So you're in quadruped, and so instead of, let's say we're stabilizing on the right leg, the left knee is going to be the one that lifts up and out to the side. What you're wanting to do before you lift up the left leg is to the side, is to rest the left leg on top of the right leg. So it's sort of at a diagonal. And if you can get your left knee to actually touch the floor past the right leg, past the right knee, just to the other side of it, that's great, because that pulls through that hip. And the hip and your legs, these are multi-dimensional joints. Our sedentary lives have kind of cloistered our movement into single dimension, sometimes two-dimensional movement, but we do have the capability to move in all of these dimensions. And so you get that leg behind the other leg, and then as you lift out and up and even kick out your foot if you can, you've got that 3, 4, 5. I mean, it's unidimensional, omnidimensional in its scope. So take your time, move very slowly for another 30 seconds. Keep moving on that leg. So the hardest part of this preparation for the building of a house is making sure that the clay was moldable, making sure that it stayed soft and was ready to be molded once the brick makers were ready for it. So in bare feet, repetitive motion was used by servants, slaves, to continually move the clay around. Now, of course, today we have lots of machinery that does all of this work for us, but you can, and I kid you not, I've done this. If you check me out on social media, you will find pictures of me and my daughter, because every summer we do this. We go and we spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes in the clay pit, and it's about a foot deep in bare feet. You take, roll up your pant legs, or if you haven't switched legs, by the way, go ahead and switch for that fire hydrant arabesque. They about 200 square feet, maybe, so a 20 by 10 spot maybe, and the raw clay is about a foot deep or so. So you take a couple of steps into this pit, and it literally will become, it's crystal clear. Your heart rate will elevate immediately. You will either be stuck, or you will fall over, or you will figure out how to move. And the people that were good at this trade actually had this system. I talked to them. I did some research about this with some of the experts there at Williamsburg, where they plant the outside midfoot into the clay first, and then roll the foot flat, and then press down with the heel, and then lift up with the heel so that the big toe could interact deeply with the clay before taking the next step. It's amazing stuff. Okay, now let's go back to one more plank. We're going to finish up with one more plank, and then I'm going to get you into hip bridge, and we're going to do one more rotational exercise that helps your hips before we get started. But this is just such a fascinating topic to me, because we at InShape, I see this. I don't do anything with clients on a treadmill or on an elliptical or a stationary bicycle unless they specify that they really want to do this type of work. But it is a regular observation that I make that you're finished with your plank, sit in child's pose for a couple more seconds. With an elliptical or with a treadmill, where you can see how the repetitive motion, the pain of repetitive motion is something to respect and to mitigate when you can. And that's why these other exercises, a lot of lateral movement exercises, the inner thigh movement, we're going to add in with the hip bridge as well. But you definitely need to do some work in order, in modern days, to prevent yourself from the decay on your dominant side in particular, but definitely in terms of both of your joints and the quality of your life as a result of that. So turn your body over now to your hip bridge, which means you lie on your back and your hips are in the air and your feet are on the floor. Your toes are down, your feet are straight, so your toes and your heels line up. And you are officially now in hip bridge with your butt in the air. Now, if you have a pillow close by, or maybe one of those soft kind of beach ball, plastic balls, or a balloon, you could squeeze. I just like that isometric contraction of those inner thigh muscles. We do so little with the inner thigh, and inside of the knee area of our lives. There's just not that much activity that activates these tissues. So squeeze it isometrically. You're not moving the muscle, but you are stimulating it by getting some fresh oxygenated blood to it. And now you're going to lower your hips and then lift back up. All right, for about 30 seconds. The left side and the right side of the body are never going to be absolutely symmetrical, equal. Right? If you are right-handed, it is just a function of your existence that your right leg is going to be stronger than your left. But there are things that you can do that mitigate the significance of that strength difference. And by doing exercises that use one leg independently of the other, that's why we did those lunges and the forward kicks and all the fire hydrants. All those exercises force your left leg, because I'm speaking to the right-handed people. I know I'm left-handed, but all of the right-handed people I know have something I call lame left leg syndrome. To varying degrees, it is just a fact of life that you've got to really work to make sure that the left leg is doing its part of your moving around. Okay, now drop the ball or the pillow, or if you don't have one, just stay in the hip bridge, lifted position. The last move we're going to do is something that, again, isolates your legs because it forces one leg to stabilize the body as the other upper body part of your body is moving. What you're going to do is you're going to extend your arms now out to the sides, palms facing up. And I want the right arm to lift up off the floor, keep it straight, and the right shoulder comes with it as you tap the left hand over on the left side of the body. And then return to start. So keep both feet firmly planted on the floor when you're doing this, but you're going to feel more stability focused on the right side of the body. Now, you're about 15 seconds in, so we're going to go for another 15 seconds, and I'm going to switch you to the other side. And then I'm going to give you a couple of stretches to do if you want to go back to this. We call it a hip bridge reach. It's a really important exercise that I build into almost all of my client exercise routines because it is so effective, not only at isolating the legs independently of one another, but also of building relatively safe and simple rotational component into an exercise regimen. So unless you have impingement in your shoulders, which if you do, be very careful, or maybe just don't do this at all, but just be careful. If you have any interest in repetitive motion work, all of these exercises, and I have dozens more that I can give to you if you want to get in touch with my team and I. We're at bodybyInShape.com. You can contact us through the website or through social media, InShape Fitness NYC on Facebook and InShape Fitness on Twitter, I think. So let's do a couple of stretches now. Hug your knees. You're lying on your back. Get that knee, bring those knees in. Make sure you're hugging your knees. Try to keep your back straight and flat. Elongate through the back. We already did child's pose. That's a really great exercise, stretch exercise to do at the end of each of your workouts, and downward facing dog. You want to stretch out your IT band. And the way that you do that is to straighten from your knee hug, straighten one leg. And then using the opposite hand, pull the hugged knee across the body over to the floor, keeping both shoulders flat on the floor. And then straighten that leg out, that knee, straighten out the leg across the body. And then switch sides. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for listening to the repetitive motion Colonial Williamsburg style workout. And I'm Coach Kim from In Shape Fitness. I will see you again next week.